In a country torn apart by civil war, a young 22-year-old, Sergei Eisenstein, broke away from the family occupation of engineering and placed himself into the world of art as a set designer at Moscow's Proletkult Theater in the early 1920s.
A very interesting man, a very complex man, a man who came to cinema from the theater, and I think that always stayed with him. A man who's terribly concerned with arranging the actors and the scenery within the frame, mise en scène. And a man who passionately believed that the art of editing was fundamental to filmmaking.
Vertov, Kolchev, and a lot of other folks at the time were working in film in Moscow, and they were all part of this film school that worked together and developed some great theories of editing, of filmmaking.
It was not until Eisenstein first saw the works of D.W. Griffith with his profound editing style and camera technique that it influenced him to step into the new budding world of cinema. Eisenstein brought to the screen one of his most controversial, influential, and notable films of all time, Battleship Potemkin in 1925.
When people talk about Eisenstein and they talk about the Battleship Potemkin, everybody goes to the Odessa Steppe sequence. You know, Woody Allen, Brian De Palma, lots of folks have referenced it in films.
Battleship Potemkin is one of the great all-time films in film history. And what was so unusual was that Eisenstein realized that the cinema medium could both compress time, but also expand it.
He came to it by thinking about pictograms and how the Chinese and the Japanese in their language take pictures, and they take one picture and put it with another picture and come up with a third kind of meaning. I'd like to try and take and build on Eisenstein and think about taking inside each image parts of the image and how those parts of the image interact with one another, much like a pictogram, and how it creates a greater whole within the frame. And then that would be a word or that would be a phrase. And then that phrase is then put in conjunction with another phrase that makes a paragraph or makes a sentence. And hence we have a film language or literature that's building a story through montage, but also through composition, also through framing. So you're taking all these building blocks, letters if you would, and pulling them together to create a visual story or a visual emotion or a visual idea. Eisenstein really kind of decoded that and began it, and people have built on it ever since.
Now, how many seconds it took for the Cossacks to march down shooting at the raggle-taggle of people on the steps. Maybe it was 30 seconds, maybe it was a minute, maybe it was 1:30. It doesn't really matter. When Eisenstein made that film, he cut independently from shot to shot, angle to angle, action to action, and he expanded something that would have been over very quickly into an epic of shooting and death and dying and confusion and horror. He made of something which was pretty horrific as a subject, he made it something immense. It was a magnificent example of just what film editing can do.
My favorite piece in the Battleship Potemkin is where he stretches time, where just before the sailors revolt, and there's maggots in the bread, and the food is horrible, and there's a smashing of a plate. And he takes and extends time throughout that smashing of the plate by the way he's cutting and building that, lifting of the plate up and then smashing the plate down. That was revolutionary to the time period.
To that extent, he really changed filmmaking.
Created in the midst of the revolution, Eisenstein's imagery and content was put on the front line of political critics wanting to censor his films.
At first, it was very difficult to see Battleship Potemkin. It was regarded as communist propaganda. It was banned in Russia and America at various times, but people got to see it in film societies. Cinema was essentially part of the state apparatus. And because of that, it was censored. Now, the degree to which you got censorship within Russian cinema varied a lot. In the early days, it was comparatively free. Under Stalin, particularly in the mid-30s, Eisenstein was always an independent spirit. After the Bolshevik Revolution, the communists took over, and Lenin said that of all the arts, the cinema is the art that best relates to the Russian people. And he said that because most of the Russian people were illiterate, but they could read and understand a message in pictures, which was film. Today, Steven Soderbergh, who's a very advanced director, he did Traffic, he did Erin Brockovich, very much uses Eisenstein's structure of film editing. He's very intense in directing the audience's eye to particular details. He eschews the very long and very wide shot. Eisenstein was completely against that. He believed that in communist philosophy, you proposed something that was a thesis, you argued it, that was the antithesis, and the fruit of conflicting the thesis and the antithesis would produce a synthesis, a new meaning.
Eisenstein's contribution to cinema still lives on in current works. Many filmmakers of past and present owe much gratitude and homage to this one man, the father of montage.